The world changed while you were sleeping. Something is falling from the sky over Tehran, and it is not snow. It is not ash from a brush fire. It is black rain, crude oil suspended in storm clouds, descending on a metropolitan area of 9 million human beings after a sustained bombing campaign reduced Iran's petroleum infrastructure to towering columns of fire visible from space. The smoke has eaten the sky, sewage systems are rupturing, streets that once carried commuters now carry rivers of flame, and somewhere in Washington, D.C., the man who authorized all of it picked up a phone, dialed into ABC News, and calmly delivered this assessment to the American people. I am not worried about anything at all. Sit with that for a moment, the architecture of denial. We are living through something that does not yet have a name in the history books because the history books have not caught up. A sitting American president has launched a war without a congressional declaration, without a formal coalition, without an articulated endgame that has now produced the following results in under 2 weeks. The Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply flows on any given day, has gone functionally dark. Kuwait's petroleum chief confirmed that tanker traffic has collapsed to near zero, a maritime shutdown without precedent in modern history. The last time something close to this happened was over 8 decades ago. Energy markets are in freefall. Iraqi oil output has cratered by more than 60%. Qatar, one of the world's primary suppliers of liquefied natural gas, has ceased production entirely. Insurance markets for tankers operating anywhere near the Persian Gulf have become effectively non-functional. American service members are dead. Their names were read aloud on national television this past weekend. Captain Cody Cork, Sergeant First Class Nicole Moore, Sergeant First Class Noah Tenz, Sergeant Declan Cody, Major Jeffrey O'Brien, Chief Warrant Officer Third Class Robert Marsison. 6 human beings. 6 families who will spend the rest of their lives carrying a weight that no press release, no campaign hat, and no victory lap can ever touch. Retaliatory strikes have landed in Tel Aviv, in Bahrain, in Kuwait. Ballistic missiles and Shahed drones are moving through airspace that was, 2 weeks ago, considered relatively stable. And the president's description of all of this? A little glitch. We had to take this detour. How we got here. The sequence that was buried. The pace of this conflict has been so disorienting, so relentless, that the sequence of events, the actual chronological order of what happened and why, has been swallowed by the noise. Let's rebuild it. The United States and Israel began with what were framed as targeted military strikes against Iranian defense infrastructure. Standard justification: neutralize the threat, degrade capability, send a message. The logic is familiar even if the legality is contested. But the strikes did not stop there. They expanded to oil infrastructure, to refineries, to the economic organs of a nation of 90 million people. Then, according to independent investigations conducted separately by Reuters, CNN, and the New York Times, not exactly a coalition of Iranian state media, a strike hit an elementary school in southern Iran. More than 170 people were killed. Dozens of them were children. Iran, facing this, made a choice that surprised a lot of Western analysts. It accepted a ceasefire. It exercised restraint. It framed its own military response as self-defense. And then, when the aggression paused, Iran paused too. What happened next is the hinge point of everything. The strikes resumed. More oil facilities, hospitals, and then the infrastructure that in a desert region is arguably more existential than oil itself, freshwater desalination plants, the systems that turn seawater into something human beings can drink. Iran looked at this pattern. It looked at the ceasefire it had honored in good faith. It looked at what followed that ceasefire, and it made a different calculation this time. Iran said no. The 3 receipts. That refusal, that single word, is now reshaping the entire strategic landscape. But to understand why, you need to see the 3 specific moments from this past weekend that reveal not just what is happening, but how it is being managed by the people in charge. Receipt 1, the ABC interview. Donald Trump calls into ABC News. Correspondent Mary Bruce asks him the questions that any wartime commander-in-chief should have answers for. Are you worried about the safety of Americans at home? Are you concerned about retaliatory terrorism? What about the economic impact? Gas prices, grocery prices, retirement accounts, his answers in sequence, no, no, no. I am not worried about anything at all. I think it is fine. Then, in the same call, he confirms that ground forces remain an option. He references reports of special operations personnel being deployed inside Iran to locate and secure enriched uranium. And then he says something that, in any previous era of American foreign policy, would have triggered a constitutional crisis. He says that if Iran selects its next supreme leader without consulting him personally, the new one will not last long. He wants to personally approve the selection of the supreme religious and political authority of a sovereign nation of 90 million people. That is not geopolitical strategy. That is the kind of statement that foreign ministries quietly circulate to allies as evidence of something having gone fundamentally wrong at the top. Receipt 2. The Lindsey Graham Doctrine. The White House deploys Senator Lindsey Graham to the morning show circuit. What follows is not a policy briefing. It is not a strategic assessment. It is something closer to a wartime variety show. Graham appears on camera wearing two hats. One reads, "Free Cuba." The other reads, "Make Iran Great." He then delivers what can only be described as a promotional monologue for future conflicts, while a current one is actively killing American soldiers. We are marching through the world. We are cleaning out the bad guys. Iran is going down, and Cuba is next. A sitting United States senator on live national television during an active armed conflict with American casualties is pitching the next war. He calls Trump the greatest commander-in-chief in American history. He tells Gulf Arab allies, nations whose water infrastructure is currently being shredded in the crossfire of this conflict, that if they want a security treaty with the United States, they need to get in this fight. That is not an alliance. That is a protection racket with a broadcast deal. And the detail that tells you everything about the actual decision-making process driving this war. Graham reportedly sells Trump on military escalation by presenting him with branded merchandise. Hats. The strategic direction of American armed forces in the most volatile region on Earth is being influenced by hat-based diplomacy. Receipt 3. The Fox News Substitution. This one is quieter, but it may be the most revealing window into the information management surrounding this conflict. On Saturday, the remains of 6 American service members were returned to Dover Air Force Base in a dignified transfer ceremony, the solemn, formal ritual by which the nation receives its fallen. President Trump attended. He was wearing his $55 campaign hat, the same hat currently listed for sale on his official campaign website. Fox News aired the ceremony. Except they did not air the actual ceremony. They aired footage from a dignified transfer that took place during Trump's first term, one in which he was not wearing campaign merchandise. When the substitution was discovered, Fox issued an on-air correction, describing it as an inadvertent error. There is a simple question worth sitting with. In the entire history of Fox News, when has the network ever made an inadvertent error that made the president look more dignified? What Iran actually said. While the American side of this conflict was producing the spectacle described above, Iran's foreign minister appeared on Meet the Press and delivered something the White House clearly had not wargamed: composed, surgical, rational defiance. Most nations confronting the full military weight of the United States enter some version of a scramble. Back channels open, intermediaries are activated, language softens. Iran did the opposite. The foreign minister laid out Iran's position with the kind of logical clarity that made it genuinely difficult to dismiss as bluster. The argument reconstructed. The first time you attacked us, we accepted your ceasefire in good faith. We used that pause not to rearm aggressively, but to demonstrate that we were a party capable of honoring an agreement. You used that same pause to rearm and attack us again. You struck our schools, you struck our hospitals, you struck our water supply, the infrastructure people need to survive at a basic biological level. So we looked at the pattern, we looked at what our restraint produced, and we have made a strategic decision. We are not accepting another temporary pause that gets used to position for the next attack. We want a permanent end to this war. Until we have that, we will continue to defend our people. That is not the language of a regime on the verge of collapse. That is a negotiating position built on pattern recognition, and it represents a fundamental collapse of Washington's core strategic assumption that sustained pressure would force Iran to fold. The assumption was wrong. And now there is no visible exit strategy. The economic transmission. Here is what this means if you are not a foreign policy analyst, a senator, or a defense contractor. Here is what this means if you buy groceries, fill a gas tank, or have any money in a retirement account. The Strait of Hormuz shutdown is not a temporary inconvenience. 20% of global oil supply moved through that waterway. When that volume disappears from markets, energy prices do not gradually adjust. They spike, and the spike transmits through every supply chain that touches transportation, heating, manufacturing, or agriculture, which is to say, all of them. Analysts modeling the current disruption are projecting that food costs, energy costs, airline fares, freight rates, and insurance components in consumer price indexes could push headline inflation above 4% by spring. That is not a Wall Street abstraction. That is the price of the thing you put in your cart at the grocery store. And here is the structural reality that does not make it into most coverage. Supply chains that reroute do not simply snap back when a ceasefire is eventually signed. Companies that have restructured logistics around new shipping lanes, new energy sources, new supplier relationships, they do not reverse those decisions because a deal gets announced on cable news. The economic reconfiguration embeds itself. The jobs follow the new routes. The investment follows the new routes. And the old routes do not recover on the timeline that press releases suggest they will. 3 futures. There is no clean outcome available from where things stand. But there are 3 scenarios that serious analysts are currently modeling, and none of them leave the world looking the way it did 2 weeks ago. The managed exit back-channel pressure, from Gulf states watching their infrastructure burn, from European allies watching energy markets destabilize, from American business interests watching earnings forecasts collapse, forces a genuine ceasefire negotiation. Not a pause, an actual framework. Both sides declare victory in the language their domestic audiences require. Trump announces the greatest deal in the history of deals. Iran's leadership tells its people that they stood firm and the aggressor blinked. The strait reopens, markets stabilize. But the structural damage does not reverse. The Gulf states that watch their desalination plants targeted, their sovereignty threatened, their neutrality publicly undermined by Israeli officials claiming Emirati participation that the UAE furiously denied. Those states recalibrate, quietly, permanently, in ways that take years to fully manifest. The realignment. The UAE's angry denial of Israeli claims about Emirati involvement in strikes on Iran is not a footnote. It is a signal. Kuwait's economy is being hollowed out by a conflict it had no part in starting. Bahrain's water infrastructure has been targeted. Qatar has shut down LNG production. These are American partners. Or they were. They are now watching the security architecture they built their foreign policy around get weaponized in ways that create direct harm to their populations. And they are watching China, India, and other major powers that are not currently bombing their neighbors. The realignment that follows does not look like a dramatic break. It looks like hedging, diversification, insurance policies, new relationships that did not exist before. And over time, the United States remains the most powerful single actor in the room, but the room is no longer organized around American preference as the default. The expansion Lindsey Graham has already named this scenario on television: ground forces, special operations inside Iran, an attempt at something that would functionally constitute regime change in a nation of 90 million people, with a battle-hardened military, mountainous terrain, and a population that, whatever its complicated relationship with its own government, has a demonstrated history of unifying against external invasion. And then, per Graham's own framing, Cuba. The march continues. This scenario ends in a place that nobody in the current administration appears to have seriously wargamed, because the people driving the decisions are more focused on the merchandise than the maps. The lesson that has already been learned here is what is already true, regardless of which scenario unfolds from here. The strategic architecture that organized the Middle East for the past several decades is gone. Not weakened, not strained, gone. Even if a ceasefire is signed tomorrow, even if markets stabilize and oil starts flowing through Hormuz again, the lesson has been absorbed by every government watching this unfold. The American security guarantee is contingent on the preferences of whoever holds the office at any given moment. Those preferences can change. The framework you built your entire foreign policy around can be handed to someone who calls a regional war a detour, attends military funerals and campaign merchandise, and decides he wants personal approval authority over the religious succession of a sovereign nation. Iran did not start this conflict, but its foreign minister just told the world on American television that Iran has no intention of ending it on terms set by Washington. Trump did not build an exit strategy, he built a merchandise line, and Lindsey Graham did not articulate a military doctrine. He pitched a world tour of destruction and handed the commander-in-chief a hat. The questions that matter now are the ones nobody in a position of power seems to be asking. When a senator says, "We are marching through the world," does anyone in that building know where the march ends? When a president says, "I am not worried about anything at all," is that confidence, or is it the specific kind of certainty that only exists in the absence of information? And when a nation looks at the pattern of what followed its last act of restraint and decides that restraint produced nothing but a better positioned adversary, what does it take to convince that nation to extend its hand one more time? The black rain is still falling on Tehran, the strait is still dark, and the names of 6 Americans who will not be coming home deserve to be spoken without a price tag in the frame.